I wasn't expecting guests when the rain hammered the roof like the forest itself wanted to drown us. Nights out here were supposed to be simple. Wood stove ticking, old pipes sighing, the fence groaning when wind leaned its weight against the boards. The house, 2 stories of stubborn timber and patched shingles, sat where the tree line thinned into pasture. A tired old animal with a high fence and a watchman's shed stitched on like an afterthought. I'd traded the noise of cities and orders for the quiet that hurts if you listen too long. It suited me. Mostly. The first knock was soft enough to mistake for a branch. The second was not. I set the mug down. The ache in my knee announced itself when I stood. The familiar drag in my right leg didn't ask permission to come along. The scar along my throat itched as it always did before trouble. Habit made my hand go to the latch by the door, where an iron hook held a raincoat, a flashlight, and the weight of old decisions. Outside, the rain had become a wall. The path from the porch to the gatehouse was a strip of mud I knew by memory. I moved slow, not because I wanted to, because I had to. Every step sent a complaint up my spine. By the time I reached the little shed by the gate, I was wet to the bones and angry at the weather for being so damn dramatic. Another knock, 3 quick raps, the kind someone learns when asking has never worked. I slid the peephole panel aside. A face hovered on the other side of the bars, too young and too sharp, lit by lightning for a blink. Wet hair clung to cheekbones. Blood thinned by rain ran in a rusty ribbon from the temple, disappearing into a collar gone dark with water. His left eye was swelling shut. His mouth was bent into a smile that didn't belong on a night like this. "Open," he said, voice steady, not begging. "Name," I said. "Pick one. I've got plenty." He cocked his head. "But if it helps your sense of order, Rye." He didn't say, "Sir." He didn't say, "Please." Most people who made it to this gate did, even if the word tasted like dirt to them. Lightning stitched the sky again, and I caught the flicker of metal where his coat gaped. "You're bleeding." Obvious, but so was the knife in the inside pocket. "And armed." "I'm both smarter and dumber than I look," he said. "Depends on who you ask. And if I don't open?" He glanced past me at the house, the half-seen glow in the kitchen window, the suggestion of a life that wasn't running. "If you want, I'll go," he said with a shrug that tried for carelessness and landed on exhaustion. "If you let me stay, don't meddle. If you want, I'll go. If you let me stay, don't meddle." Most people at the gate were bargains wearing skin. I knew the sound. I'd brought it home from deployments in bad rooms where you talk low and keep your back to the wall. My instinct, my old broken stubborn instinct, rose anyway. Too young, too sharp, too much like the ones I should stop rescuing. But the storm didn't care about my better judgment, and neither did the scar that tugged when I looked at him. He didn't flinch under it. He just stood there, rain beating lines into his face like somebody was trying to write him down. "Where from?" I asked. He smirked with half his mouth. "Where do you think?" Not a helpful answer. Not a helpful question. Lightning again. And in that wash of white, I read him like I'd read men. In sand and alleys, the set of his shoulders, trained to roll with. Impact. The angle of his stance ready to spring but not to flee. The knife's placement reach with his right. Quick, practiced. He had the wired alertness of a stray that's been kicked too many times and still bites. "You alone?" I asked. "Tonight," he said. Meaning, not always. Meaning, don't ask about the others. A gust shoved at the fence. The gate shivered. Behind me, the house creaked the way old houses do when they're listening. I could almost hear the stove tick in the silence between thunder. My knee throbbed in time. I thumbed the intercom that led to the main hall. "Stay off the porch," I said into it. "Visitor at the gate." "I've got it. Copy," came Anna's voice, drowsy, unafraid. The pregnant ones always learn to sound steady early. "We teach it here, the way you teach fire to sit in a hearth." I released the button and looked back at the kid. Rye. Rain made dark stars on his eyelashes and left his irises a color I couldn't name in the night. Something between green and stubborn. "You understand the rules," I said. I didn't list them. I don't. On purpose. If a person needs the rules spelled out, they're not ready to keep them. I understand doors, he said. They either open or they don't. That knife stays sheathed. That depends on what's inside. He tensed, then forced the tension into another smirk. Kidding. Kind of. You don't scare me, I said. Good, he said. And for the first time the smile shifted. Less weapon, more defense slipping. I've had enough men who were scared of me for all the wrong reasons. The floodlight over the gate stuttered to life, making the rain into falling glass. In the glare, he looked smaller and more dangerous at once. Too pretty for the world that had tried to break him. Too familiar in the way he held his chin like he'd learned it under someone else's hand. I should have sent him away. I thought of the others sleeping inside, the lanky beta boy who'd been trying to grow into his shoulders. The old fighter who woke at any sound. The woman who had started humming to her belly only last week. I thought of all the ways a stranger could be a fuse. I thought of the last time I'd opened a door because someone knocked and how the price had followed me home. Too young, too sharp, too much like the ones I should stop rescuing. And I couldn't let him walk back into that rain. Turn out your pockets, I said. He sighed, exaggerated, and patted them down, his hands shaking only when he thought I wasn't looking. A lighter with a chipped enamel flame, a folded receipt, washed to fuzz, 2 coins that had no business in this country. He left the knife where it was and met my eyes like a dare. Keep it, I said. But remember, who opened the gate? He blinked, not the reaction he'd prepared for. That's supposed to impress me? No, I said. It's supposed to warn you. Silence, the kind that has weight to it. Then I drew the bolt. The metal sang low, like it hadn't spoken in too long. I swung the gate just wide enough for one person to pass. He hesitated, only a fraction, as if there might be an invisible thread across the threshold. Maybe there was. Places like this collect threads. People like us do too. House is old, I said. Try not to insult her cooking. I only insult out of affection, he said, and the corner of his mouth twitched. He took a step. The floodlight shadowed his face, and the rain's noise softened for a heartbeat, like even the weather was waiting to see if he'd bolt. He didn't. He slid through the gap like a decision finally made, lifted his chin, and met my stare with a challenge bright enough to cut through the storm. Rye crossed the threshold, and in his eyes there was nothing like gratitude, only defiance, clear and clean as a blade. The dining hall was always the same at night, the creak of wood under bare feet, the faint sting of dried herbs hanging in bundles over the rafters, the steam of stew carrying more patience than flavor. It wasn't much, but it was ours. 4 walls and a table long enough to hold what was left of a pack. I guided Rye through the doorway. He didn't look impressed. His eyes swept the room like he was already measuring exits and weaknesses, not seats. 3 faces lifted toward him. Anna sat nearest the stove, both hands around a chipped mug. Pregnancy had made her slower, but not softer. If anything, her tongue had sharpened with the weight she carried. Max, the lanky beta boy, perched on the bench across from her, pretending not to hide the way his shoulders hunched at shadows. And at the far end, Silas. Stone-faced, scarred, built of silence more than flesh. He raised his gaze, nothing else. New one? Anna asked, as if I'd dragged home a stray dog. Visitor, I said. Rye's mouth tilted, sly and tired all at once. Name's Rye. You'll forget it soon enough. Max blinked, wide-eyed, as though the boy at the door was something dragged from a story meant to scare him into obedience. Anna snorted. With that attitude, maybe we'll want to. Silas said nothing. He simply studied Rye as if waiting to see if he'd dissolve into smoke. The table felt tighter. I'd seen it before, when someone new arrived. The air turned heavy, like the wood itself held its breath. Sit, I said. Rye shrugged, shaking water from his shoulders, and slid onto the bench opposite Max. His knife hand twitched once before he stilled it under the table. Anna ladled stew into a bowl, slid it toward him with a look that could cut leather. Eat. Rye leaned over the bowl, breathed in, then pulled back with a grimace. This smells like something I ate in a cage once. Worse, actually. Anna's eyebrows shot up. You insulting my cooking, boy? I'm insulting my luck, Rye said, smirking. Don't take it personal. Max muffled a laugh. then choked it down when I caught his eye. Silas didn't blink. I set my own bowl down with a solid thud. "This isn't a cage," I said flatly. "And while you're under my roof, you'll eat what's put in front of you." Rye's gaze flicked to me, sharp as the knife he thought I'd forgotten about. For a heartbeat, I expected him to argue, maybe even stand. Instead, he snorted through his nose like the whole thing amused him and dipped the spoon. "Fine," he said, "but if I die of blandness, it's on you, old man." Anna barked a laugh. Max looked scandalized at the insult. Silas allowed the ghost of something like approval to crease the corner of his mouth. Rye ate, slow at first, then steady, like his body had betrayed the bravado and reminded him it was starving. I leaned back, watching the shape of him in this place that wasn't his. Wet clothes clinging, bruises dark under his eyes, knife glinting faint in the lamplight. Every line of him said flight, every word said fight. He didn't ask for safety. He didn't bow his head like most. But he was already ours. The house had a room we called the clinic, though it was nothing more than a converted pantry with a cot and a cabinet of bandages scavenged from half a dozen towns. I'd patched bullet holes and broken ribs in worse places. Still, the smell of iodine clung to the walls, sharp and bitter. Rye sat on the cot, his shoulders split open from whatever chain or fist had met him before he stumbled through our gate. He rolled the sleeve back, glaring at me like I was the real threat. "Don't," he said, as I reached for the gauze. "You'll rot if I don't. I've rotted before." His hand slid to the knife he still carried, the hilt flashing under the lamplight. My knee ached from standing too long, but the muscle memory in me moved faster than his threat. I caught his wrist, twisted just enough for the blade to clatter onto the floorboards. The sound was loud in the tiny room. "Don't test me," I said, low, steady. His eyes flared, shock, then fury, then something closer to respect, though he'd never admit it. I didn't press. I let go and bent back to my work, wiping blood and rain from his skin with practiced indifference. "You always manhandle your guests?" he muttered. "Only the ones who bring knives to the dinner table." He smirked, sharp-edged. "Then you'll be busy with me, maybe," I said, tying the bandage firm. "But you're not dead yet. That means I'm doing something right." He scoffed but didn't move again. For all his snarling, he let me finish. His skin trembled under my hands, but not with fear. With the raw instinct of someone who'd learned the world doesn't touch without taking. By morning, he was in the yard with Silas. The old alpha leaned on the fence, watching Rye try to hammer loose boards back into place. "You're holding it wrong," Silas said. His voice was gravel worn smooth by silence. "I'm holding a hammer," Rye shot back, squinting against the sunlight. His dark hair stuck in damp clumps to his forehead. "How many ways can you hold a hammer?" "Enough to make you useless or useful," Silas replied. He gestured with a nod. "Flip your grip," Rye bristled. His pride was a blade he never put down. But he turned the hammer, tried again, and this time the nail sank clean into the wood. Silas gave a grunt that was as close to praise as the man offered. Rye caught it, smirk curling. "Guess I'm useful then?" "You'll learn," Silas said. "Didn't say I wanted to. You wouldn't be fixing the fence if you didn't." I watched from the porch, unseen. The clash between them wasn't anger. It was iron sharpening iron. Silas saw it too. Rye's mouth said no, but his hands worked steady, each strike of the hammer more certain than the last. The fence held because Rye wanted it to. That was something no cage could teach. That night, the fire in the hearth painted the walls in orange. Shadows of chairs and bent shoulders stretched long against the beams. Max shuffled a battered deck of cards, his fingers clumsy but eager. "Deal me in," Rye said, dropping onto the bench across from him. Max's eyes went wide. "You, know how to play?" Rye leaned forward, grin tilted. "Kid, I could play blindfolded and beat you twice." Max puffed up, indignant, and fumbled through the deal. The first hand was chaos. Max dropping cards, Rye needling him with sarcasm. But when Rye laid down a winning set, he laughed. Not the mocking bark he'd used before. A real laugh, quick and bright, like something hidden had startled its way out of him. The sound snapped through the room. Anna glanced up from her mending. Silas shifted, not quite smiling, but his eyes softer than before. Even I froze by the firewood stack, surprised at how the noise hit me, sharp as any memory and just as dangerous. Rye laughed again, head thrown back, a bruise under his jaw stark against the light. Max grinned, caught in the glow of it, forgetting for once the shadows he feared. For a heartbeat, the whole hall breathed easier. I leaned on the mantel, watching the flame catch and curl. He wasn't just a survivor. He wasn't just bruises and knives. There was fire in him, banked, but not gone. Most who came through our doors carried only ashes. Rye carried sparks, and sparks, if you weren't careful, could burn a whole house down, or light it from the inside. The night smelled of pine and damp earth, the kind of night when the forest whispered with too many voices, none of them friendly. I heard him before I saw him, soft footfalls on the path, the telltale hush of someone trying too hard to disappear. I'd lived too long with soldiers and fugitives not to know the sound. Rye slipped through the gate with a bundle slung over his shoulder. He moved like a shadow that thought itself clever. Trouble was, I knew every shadow this place made. I let him get halfway down the road before I stepped out from the tree line. Going somewhere? He froze. Just a heartbeat. Then his chin lifted like defiance could cover hesitation. I told you I wasn't staying. I leaned on my bad leg, folding my arms. That's not what you said. You said if I let you stay, I shouldn't meddle. Different words, different meaning. His mouth twisted. You sound like you collect contracts for a living. Only debts, I said. He laughed without humor. Then consider mine paid. I stepped closer. The moon slid from behind a cloud, silvering his bruises, the set of his jaw. The bundle looked pitifully light. No one runs far with that little. You think the world out there's waiting with open arms? I asked. I don't think it cares about me either way. Which is better than here, where everyone stares like I'm about to explode. Maybe because you act like you are. His eyes flared. I'm not yours. I don't want to be part of your dramas, your broken little family. The words should have rolled off me. Instead, they caught. The scar at my throat burned like an old warning. I kept my face steady. Then why? I asked, my voice low. Do you keep coming back every time you walk away? Silence. The forest pressed in, heavy with the smell of wet leaves. He opened his mouth, closed it, then shook his head hard, as if he could scatter the question like gnats. Forget it. He shoved past me, his shoulder brushing mine. I'll manage. I let him go. I watched his back retreat down the path, narrow and stubborn, swallowed by the dark. The ache in my knee urged me to follow, drag him back by the scruff like a reckless pup. But something heavier kept me rooted. You can't force a stray to stay. They have to decide. The gate swings both ways. By morning, he was gone. The bed stripped, the little pile of borrowed clothes missing. Anna clucked her tongue but said nothing. Silas sat longer at the table, staring at his hands. Max asked twice if he'd be back, then stopped asking when he saw my face. The day dragged. Rain came and went. I split wood, checked fences, counted chores like beads on a string. I told myself not to listen for footsteps, not to leave the lantern burning. And yet, when the gate creaked open near dusk, I was already at the porch. Rye trudged inside, soaked, filthy, eyes rimmed red with lack of sleep. His bundle hung looser now, sagging as if it mocked him. He slammed it on the floor. Don't say a word, he snapped, voice raw. Not one. I raised an eyebrow. He bared his teeth, half snarl, half grimace. I'm only here because the forest tried to eat me alive, and because your stew is marginally better than starvation. That's all. Of course, I said evenly. His eyes narrowed, searching my face for the smirk I didn't give him. When he didn't find it, he cursed under his breath and stalked toward the fire, dripping water in his wake. The others pretended not to stare. Anna shook her head, muttering something about fools and storms. Max beamed with relief until Rye shot him a glare sharp enough to cut it off. I lingered by the door, letting the rain mist my boots. My chest felt too tight, though I couldn't name why. Relief, maybe. or just the familiar weight of something dangerous, settling exactly where I knew it would. He was back, angry, exhausted, defiant, but back, and I hated that some quiet part of me had been waiting for it. The storm rolled in with no warning, swallowing the night whole. The house shuddered with every strike of thunder, the beams groaning like an old soldier bracing against blows. Rain battered the shutters, sharp and relentless, until it drowned every other sound. I sat on the edge of the bed, boots still on, knife on the table, watching the shadows leap each time lightning split the sky. Nights like this used to mean incoming fire, alarms, the scramble of men too tired to stand but too alive to fall. Now it meant sleeplessness, and the ghosts that crept in when walls rattled. A sound at the door pulled me from my thoughts. Not a knock, just the faintest scuff, like someone hovering, undecided. "Rai," I said before it opened. The door pushed inward, slow. He stood there, bare feet, shirt clinging damp with sweat, face pale under the flicker of lightning. He didn't speak, just stepped inside, the way a hunted thing steps into a trap, because it's still better than the wolves outside. I gestured to the chair. He ignored it. Instead, he crossed the floor, each footfall matching the thunder. He sat on the bed beside me, stiff at first, then eased himself down until his back met the mattress. His breathing was shallow, too fast, the way men breathe when they're waiting for pain. I didn't move. The silence was a blade between us. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, it was the kind of quiet that bruises. Lightning flared, throwing his profile into relief. Eyes wide, not with fear of the storm but with something older. He trembled. And I knew it wasn't the cold. Memories leave colder scars than weather. Finally, his voice broke through, thin but sharp. "You're the first," he whispered. "The first who didn't look at me like I was for sale." His lips twitched, not quite a smile, not quite steady. "So go on, Alpha." "Look." The words struck harder than thunder. Every instinct in me screamed to close the distance. Touch, claim, anchor. The part of me that remembered what I was before injury, before walls, before failure. It surged forward, teeth bared. But I stayed where I was. I looked, like he asked, saw the curve of his throat, the bruises mapped like someone's cruel handwriting, the narrow chest rising too fast, the stubborn set of his jaw even as he shook. He lay there not offering himself, but daring me to make him less than human. And I wouldn't, so I fought myself. I held the storm inside, caged it with every ragged breath, and let him have the only thing I had left to give, my presence, my refusal to move. We stayed that way, two figures in the dark, caught between thunderclaps. The air smelled of rain forced through cracks in the shutters, the faint tang of iron, and the sharpness of fear not my own. Rai's shaking slowed, little by little. His breathing deepened. Lightning painted him again, and this time his eyes had closed. Trust, that fragile animal, had wandered into the room and curled between us. I kept my hands flat on my thighs, fingers dug into the worn fabric of my pants. If I touched him, even a brush, I didn't know what would break first, him or me. When thunder finally rolled away into the distance, I realized I'd been staring at him for too long. He shifted once, murmured something half-dreamed, and settled against the pillow. Still defiant, even in sleep, still alive. The storm left the house, but not me. I leaned back against the headboard, exhaustion pressing down heavier than armor. My scar burned faintly, a reminder of all the things I'd failed to protect. But tonight, one bruised, reckless Omega had chosen to sleep beside me, and I hadn't driven him away. The walls I'd built around myself cracked, just enough for lightning to get in. By the time spring sunlight slipped through the clouds, Rai had already found his way into the rhythm of the place. Not smoothly, nothing about him was smooth, but in that sideways, jagged way that made people adjust without noticing. Anna was the first to bend. She sat by the hearth, swollen belly balanced beneath her apron, grumbling about the weight of bending down. Rai knelt beside her with a basket of herbs he'd foraged, clumsy but determined. "Don't think I need your charity," she warned, sharp as always. "Good," he said, offering her a sprig of mint like it was treasure. "Because I don't give charity. I trade. You take this, And in return, you promise not to lecture me if I burn the stew again. Anna blinked, then laughed. A short bark she tried to smother with her hand. You? Cook? Dangerously well. He smirked. Ask Max. He ate 3 bowls. Granted, he almost died after, but still. Anna's laughter lingered, even after she sent him away with a flick of her hand. Later, in the yard, Rai stood behind Max with an axe. The boy's arms shook as he tried to split a log, the blade sticking halfway. Pathetic, Rai declared. Max's ears went red. You try, then. Rai plucked the axe free, spun it in his palm, and brought it down in one smooth stroke. The log cracked clean in 2. He handed the axe back. Smug. Lesson 1. Stop aiming like you're afraid to hit it. Max scowled. You're not a teacher. I'm the best you've got. Max tried again, gritted his teeth, and managed to split the next piece. When he looked up, Rai's grin was crooked but approving. From the porch, I caught myself almost smiling. Almost. The roof came next. A storm had torn shingles loose weeks ago, and I'd been meaning to patch them. I found Rai halfway up the ladder, hammer clenched in his teeth. What do you think you're doing? I barked. Keeping your precious fortress from falling apart. He shot back around the hammer. Get down before you break your neck. He spat the hammer into his hand, eyes glittering. You afraid of me breaking my neck, or afraid of me fixing something better than you could? I climbed the ladder anyway, ignoring the sting in my knee. We argued the whole way, about shingles, about balance, about whether nails should be hammered straight or sideways for grip. At one point I nearly slipped and Rai's hand shot out, steadying me with a muttered, Don't you dare fall, old man. I'm not carrying you. Old man? I growled. If the limp fits, he said sweetly. By the time the last shingle was nailed, we were both laughing under our breath. Not the loud kind, just those involuntary chuckles that slip out when pride loses to absurdity. That night the house felt lighter. Max told a joke badly. Anna groaned and called it worse than Rai's cooking. Silas muttered something almost resembling humor. And Rai, he leaned back in his chair, smirk sharp but eyes soft, as if he'd finally stopped bracing for the next blow. The sound of laughter didn't echo awkwardly this time. It settled into the beams, into the hearth, into me. I caught him watching me once across the table. His expression unreadable, not gratitude, not submission, something else, something that looked dangerously like belonging. I tore my gaze away before he noticed, but the truth sat heavy anyway. The pack was growing, and so was the part of me that wanted him to stay. The forest had moods. Tonight, it was holding its breath. The cicadas were silent, and the wind had gone still as if waiting for a verdict. I felt it in my scar before I heard them, the wrong cadence of boots moving through brush, too heavy, too sure. Not hunters, not wanderers. I was at the edge of the trees when they broke cover. 3 men, rough coats, eyes scanning like dogs that knew the scent they followed. Their presence was a stain against the hush of the woods. They didn't step closer to the fence. Not yet. Just lingered, speaking low among themselves, glancing at the light leaking from the windows of the main house. I returned without them seeing me. Rai was in the small cabin we used for storage, crouched by a lantern, flipping cards idly as if trying to teach himself patience. He looked up when I entered, grin already in place, until he saw my face. What? Sharpened. What did you see? Outsiders, I said. Men who aren't lost. They're looking. His expression drained, leaving something brittle. He stood too fast, the chair scraping back. Then it's time I left. You're not walking out there? He laughed once, sharp and wrong. You think they're here for your charming company? He jabbed a thumb against his chest. They're here for me. And if I stay, your precious little pack bleeds. I closed the door, slow, deliberate. The air inside the cabin thickened. You think running to them solves anything? It solves you, he snapped. It solves Anna and Max. It solves this whole, whatever the hell this is. His hands shook, but his voice didn't. I'm not worth their blood. The words hit me harder than any strike. You don't get to decide that. Yes, I do. His eyes burned in the lamplight, the fight in them raw and merciless. You gave me a bed, food, a roof. I've already taken too much. If they die because of me, he swallowed, and for the first time his voice cracked. I can't watch that again. I stepped closer, but he backed up until his shoulders met the wall. Listen to me, I said, low, fierce. You are not leaving. You are not theirs anymore. His jaw tightened. And what if they tear your walls down? What if they burn this place to ash just to drag me out? The silence after was brutal, because we both knew it wasn't impossible. Better me than them, he whispered. I wanted to shake him, to remind him what it had taken for him to laugh in this house, to coax life back into Max's eyes, to make Anna smirk when her back ached. He'd stitched himself into us, whether he saw it or not, but his stare was iron. He'd already chosen. You're a damned fool, I growled. Maybe, he said, but I'm still walking. I moved to block the door. His hand twitched toward the knife at his belt, but it was empty bravado. He didn't raise it. We stood like that for too long, the storm of our silence louder than thunder. Finally, I shifted aside, fury coiled so tight in me it hurt. I couldn't lock him in. I couldn't chain him the way the world already had. He brushed past, shoulders squared, steps rigid. He didn't look back. The cabin door swung wide, letting in the cold air of the night. His figure vanished into the dark between trees, swallowed whole. I stayed in the doorway, rage pounding like a second heartbeat, the weight of it nearly enough to break me. He thought he wasn't worth blood, but I already knew. I'd spill mine before letting him go for good. The clearing lay raw under the moon, grass slick with dew. The trees bent inward like witnesses. Rye knelt in the center, hands bound behind him, lips split, one cheek already swelling. He was on his knees, but his chin was still raised, eyes burning with the same reckless defiance I'd seen the night he came through my gate. Around him, 4 men circled, hard-eyed, scarred, dressed in coats too fine for simple hunters. And at their front, the one I'd hoped never to see, the man who had owned him. The so-called master moved like someone who believed the world bent when he breathed. His boots sank into the grass without sound. His smile cold. He crouched to grip Rye's chin, forcing his face up. Did you think you could hide, little wolf? His voice was smooth, poisonous. You were bought. You were paid for. You're mine. Rye's mouth twisted, blood on his teeth. Then you overpaid. The man struck him, sharp and casual, like disciplining an animal. Rye staggered, but didn't fall. He laughed, ragged, ugly. I'd seen enough. The forest had carried me here, silent as a ghost, my blood boiling with every step. Now I stepped from the shadows, scar burning, knee screaming, but fury driving me forward. Not yours, I said. My voice carried across the clearing like thunder. The men spun, hands to weapons. Rye's master straightened, eyes narrowing. And who are you? Another fool who thinks he can keep what isn't his? I'm the one you should have feared finding him, I growled. The closest man lunged, too fast, too confident. My body remembered long before my mind. I caught his wrist, snapped it against my thigh, and sent him sprawling, with a kick that rattled my bad knee, but lit fire through my chest. The old instincts roared awake, iron and blood. 2 more came at once. I ducked the blade of one, slammed my elbow into his ribs, spun to meet the second with a fist that cracked teeth. My muscles screamed, but I didn't stop. Couldn't stop. The beast in me, buried under years of silence, ripped free. For a moment they hesitated, not at the wounds I dealt them, but at the way I stood. Shoulders squared, chest rising like a war drum, scar glowing pale in the moonlight. An alpha. Still, the master sneered, but I saw the flicker in his eyes, the recognition. So this is where he ran. Pathetic. He yanked Rye up by the ropes, shoving him forward like a shield. Stand down, or I cut him open here. Rye's breath rasped. His eyes found mine across the space. He shook his head once. Slow. And then he did it. He threw his head back and howled. Not the sound of prey begging mercy. not the hollow cry of someone owned. It ripped from him like fire, raw and primal, a call to the marrow. The sound clawed through the trees, through the earth, through me. My heart stuttered. Because I heard it, not as a plea but as a claim. The pack heard it too. From the darkness around the clearing, footsteps crashed closer. Anna, hand on her belly, fury blazing in her eyes. Max with a torch and a broken spear he could barely hold. Silas, grim and steady, axe in hand. Even the youngest, the weakest. They came. Drawn to the sound of Rai's call, pulled to him as if he were the thread holding us together. The master's smirk faltered. What trick is this? No trick, I said, stepping forward. You made him howl. Now he's not alone. The men clashed again. But this time it wasn't just me. Silas's axe bit deep. Max swung wild, yelling louder than his strength. Anna hurled embers from the torch, eyes fierce. We weren't soldiers. We weren't trained. But we were enough. I tore Rai free from his captor's grasp, rope snapping under my grip. He stumbled into me, bloodied but unbroken. His eyes glowed in the moonlight, fierce, alive. Still think I'm yours? He spat at his master. The man hissed, retreating, bloodied followers dragging themselves away. His glare promised vengeance, but I'd seen his kind before. They don't return when the pack stands. Silence fell heavy once they vanished into the trees. Only our breathing filled the night, ragged and hot. Rai swayed, and I caught him, steadying him with a hand on his shoulder. He flinched at first, then leaned into it. For the first time, he let himself. The pack gathered around us. Anna, with her sharp tongue quiet for once, Max trembling but proud, Silas standing guard like a wall. I looked at Rai, not at the bruises or blood, not at the scars, at him. He was the spark that had dragged them all here, the heart they hadn't known they needed. And me? I was still alpha. Not because I'd fought, not because I'd won, but because I'd protected what was mine to protect. He wasn't just ours now. He was ours because he'd called, and we had answered. The morning broke slow, as if the world itself needed time to recover. Mist curled low across the clearing, softening the edges of last night's violence. The air still smelled of smoke and blood, but it carried something lighter. Too, the sharp green of pine, the promise of rain already spent. The pack moved quietly around the yard. Max dragged scraps of broken wood into a pile, humming tunelessly, his shoulders squared with a pride he hadn't worn before. Anna sat on the porch steps, one hand smoothing over her swollen belly, sharp eyes softer than usual as she scolded Max for carrying too much. Silas leaned against the fence, axe in hand, a silent sentry even now, though the threat was gone. For the first time in too long, the house didn't feel like a fortress bracing for siege. It felt like a home. Rai sat beside me on the porch rail, legs stretched out, hair still damp from where Anna had insisted on washing the blood away. His lip was swollen, one eye darkened with a bruise, but his grin was intact, if anything, sharper than before. He nudged my shoulder with his, so. We survived. Seems that way. He tilted his head, studying me with those unrelenting eyes. You don't look half dead. That's new. I hide it well. He snorted, then let the silence linger. The sun slipped higher, streaking the mist with gold. He watched it like someone who didn't trust mornings to arrive. After a long moment he said quietly, "You should have let me go." No? It would have been easier. Easier doesn't keep people alive, I answered. His jaw worked, but he didn't argue. He leaned back on his hands, the porch creaking under his weight, and for the first time since I'd met him, his posture wasn't coiled to spring. He was still sharp-edged, still stubborn, but the fight in him had shifted. Not gone, re-aimed. Max came running past, nearly tripping over his own feet. Rai, did you see? I split 3 logs without missing." Rai grinned. "Guess you're less pathetic now." Max stuck out his tongue and bolted off, laughing. Anna called after him, muttering about broken backs, then shook her head at us both. Even Silas's mouth twitched, which was as close as the old alpha came to smiling. Rai watched them with an expression I couldn't name. Something too fragile for him to admit to, too deep for words. When his gaze returned to me, it carried the weight of choice. "Well," he said at last, voice dry as ever, "congratulations, Alpha. You've officially saddled yourself with me." I raised a brow. "That so?" "Yeah." His grin tilted, reckless and raw. "Now I'm your headache forever." I let the words settle, then answered, steady. "Funny. I thought I'd run out of strength years ago. Turns out I was just waiting for you to show up." For once, Rai had no quick retort. His eyes flickered, bright in the rising sun, and the smirk softened into something almost vulnerable. He looked away, muttering, "Don't get sentimental. It's disgusting." But he didn't move from the rail. The sun burned through the mist, washing the clearing in gold. The pack gathered, drawn to the warmth, to each other. Anna's laugh rose sharp and clear. Max's voice tumbled over itself. Eager. Silas nodded once, as if approving what he saw, and Rai stayed at my side. The house had always been a place for strays, for the broken, for the ones who thought they didn't belong anywhere. But now, as the morning lit the world new, I realized it was more than that. It was ours, and for the first time in years, I felt the weight in my chest ease, not because the fight was done, but because I no longer carried it alone.